Yeah, which is
that
crazy.
one little like highway town in Norway that's like, listen,
Yeah.
when we have daylight savings 6 months out of the year, we have 45 minutes of sun. not even daylight savings. When we have time, it's like,
Yeah.
we have 6 months where it's just sun,
like,
6 months where it's just darkness. Time means nothing to us.
Exactly. I'm all here for like getting rid of daylight savings, and they're just like, you know what we can do? Just abolish
Fuck the whole
time.
thing. Get rid of the whole thing.
All right, you
God,
ready
I
to
love that.
start some podcasting?
Yeah, let's start this thing.
Let's make this the entire intro.
All right, well, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. 36% this week brought to you by I'm Brett.
And I'm Adam, and it is the 2nd of March, or oh man, it is the 2nd of July. Lord.
It's the second of some month of the year 2019.
The only
because
one?
we're still alive.
Yep, pretty much.
Well, for this week, we're hoping to bring you a ton of news that we've kind of missed out in trying to recap the debates for you. The world did not stop while the Democratic Party was chugging along, so we're hoping to recap some of the bigger Supreme Court decisions from this last term. We're going to talk about state politics from Missouri and Kansas, respectively, and, you know, because we can never leave a topic alone after we've brought it up once,
2020.
we're going to give our holistic final thoughts and feelings about the Democratic field of 2020 after the debates and after all of you lovely listeners have had a time to consume all of the internet memeage, how you feel about these things. We're going to get into all of them.
Basically, everyone can just expect this segment to be a reoccurring theme, basically until November of next year. The 2020 election. So, but I guess covering the outline and everything, we'll round things out with a nice conclusion, and then Brett and I will begin starting this season with our last segment, which we talked about last episode, but leaving you all with hot takes, as they are the bread and butter of podcasts. So
stay tuned to the end, everybody.
So pretty much
you won't want to miss it.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to want to, dip early.
So,
anyways, without
Adam,
yes,
dare I say, without further to do,
let's get into it. All right, everyone. So starting off our first topic of court decisions, the Supreme Court last week hit the deadline for this session in deciding cases and their final decisions and actions on such court case. Exactly. So they're moving into the, I guess, off season is what you would call it, of a life term game that they are playing with these 9 people are playing with the fates of 351 million people.
RBG's back in the gym. She's got the leg warmers on. She's got the oversized hoodies on. She's doing crunches. She's getting ready. She's going to come back. She's going to kick Clarence Thomas's ass. She's going to be the new Chief Justice. I can't wait for this next season of the Supreme Court.
Oh, man, that would be incredible. So anyways, Brett is going to I'm going to pass the torch, in the great words of Eric Swalwell and Joe Biden. Yeah, we're starting that off already. And he's going to talk about two major rulings, and then I will get into a third one, which the Supreme Court took a extremely surprising decision on. So, Brett, start us off.
Right. So the end of the term has come and gone, as Adam mentioned, and there are a lot of implications to take away from what we've witnessed. So this was the first full term of our dear friend Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who you can go back in the lifetime of the 36%. We have witnessed his confirmation. We've witnessed all of the scandal leading up to his confirmation hearing, and now here we are to recap his lifetime on the Supreme Court thus far. Yeah, and to say that it's been surprising would be kind of an understatement.
No. And I mean, if you guys, if you are new listeners to the podcast and want to go check those out, first, forewarning, extreme profanity is very present.
We were a little emotional,
in the second episode, especially. But the first 3 episodes will cover that. If you have any interest and want to do more deep diving into that topic.
So for what we are looking at now, and it'll be interesting to weigh our predictions from back then versus what we're seeing now. If I recall correctly, a lot of my initial thoughts and feelings were kind of reflected in this term, and a lot of things I probably understated. So the a lot of this is illustrated by the last two court cases we saw decided. One was about the citizenship question added to the U.S. Census, which by now we all know has gone the way of the dodo. We'll get to that in a minute. Another one was about political gerrymandering, rather, and the last one was about the separation of church and state. And while all three of these decisions were notable in their own right, such as the court, Chief Justice Roberts stepping away from political gerrymandering, kind of saying that, the court has not been able to find some sort of good rule by which to rule on this or to correct this, that we're just not going to touch it. We're going to stay away from it. And then the separation of church and state being more a surprising decision, well, surprising in some sense. The conservative court ruled that keeping a 40-foot crucifix on the grounds of the state capital of Maryland, was appropriate. Both of these decisions illustrated that the court is obviously shifting more conservative. They're not wanting to take up political issues, and they're siding seemingly with the church over the state. That might surprise some of the conservative constitutionalists out there who say, wait, I thought Clarence Thomas and all these people were meant to be friends of the Constitution, taken literally. I don't know how you could figuratively interpret that separation of church and state is something that is allowed when it explicitly is disallowed. But when you start to look into what the justices are actually writing, we get a much better picture of what's happening here. So what's happening is that Chief Justice John Roberts is now the swing vote. For the past time in memoriam, RBG, because she's always been on the court, has largely served in this role with this battle before Justice Kavanaugh was on the court, when Anthony Kennedy, the justice he made way for, was the swing vote traditionally. Most notably, he was the swing vote in the 2015 case, Obergefell v. Hodges, which, of course, legalized gay marriage. He was the swing vote with the liberals in a number of other cases throughout time. After his departure, RBG stepped into that role for a little while, and then now, largely, she's made way for Chief Justice John Roberts. He is brought into the court, obviously, as a conservative justice to make conservative decisions, and he's largely done so. Not a ton of his decisions have been surprising. What is more surprising is the time he's broken and gone with the liberals. So, for instance, on the case dealing with the U.S. Census that we'll get to, he broke with the conservative members of the court and sided with the liberals, and kind of this weird balance he's struck of being a conservative but also wanting to uphold the institution that is the Supreme Court against political philandering, you could say, that you might interpret from some of the decisions written by Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. Speaking of the two lovable idiots on the court, we don't love them and they are idiots, but they have, Brett Kavanaugh especially has proven to be a lot more of a strict justice in interpreting the Constitution than we might have been led to believe during all of his confirmation hearings, where we all just assumed he was this crazy wild idiot. He has a little bit of actual substance to a lot of his decisions in grounding it in solid constitutional ideology. It's conservative ideology. I disagree with a lot of his decisions, but he doesn't seem to be the wild man that we were all kind of anticipating, which means that Justice Gorsuch has actually played a little bit more of a decisive role in some of these important decisions. Notably, he sided with the liberals on more than one occasion. Him and Justice Sotomayor seem to be getting along quite well. And meanwhile, Clarence Thomas is doing the typical thing he's doing, which is not saying anything and saying that, you idiots, the Constitution says that everyone's unequal, so why don't we just get back to that? Hopefully he'll be off the court within the next term. He declined to step down at the end of this term, as a lot of people thought, but he claims to be sitting pretty. So the headline for the article that I'm largely pulling from was Ginsburg passing the liberal torch, takeaways from a big Supreme Court term. What they're kind of discussing is that Justice Elana Kagan has stepped up into the role that RBG has traditionally played in writing these scathing liberal dissents. We've actually seen some of the most colorful language come from Kagan dissents and some of the most powerful language coming from Kagan dissents, and a couple of the majority opinions that she signed on to as well. She seems to be the person that is decrying a lot of this conservative interpretation that the majority is taking most notably in this practice of ignoring, and this is important, of ignoring previous court precedent and establishing their own. This has been what Justice Samuel Alito has been writing about since the early 2000s when he first joined the court. This is what contributed to the Janus decision last year, which largely gutted already limping unions in America, and it's setting up for a future bout with Roe v. Wade that allows the court to stand on precedent while ignoring precedent, because they're laying the groundwork right now to, again, strip Roe v. Wade when that court case inevitably comes up. So Elana Kagan has been the one tapped, seemingly, by Justice Ginsburg to be the loud, iconic figure that someone needs to be on that court. I think RBG sadly kind of noticing that her time is running out on the court. Hopefully Elana Kagan can pick up the torch and run with it in that regard. So, again, the biggest takeaways from this last term are that Chief Justice Roberts is not always as safe of a conservative bet as he was thought to be when he joined the court. He's actually a little bit more moderate, or at least has proven to be over the last term, and that the conservative members of the court are desperately trying to lay the groundwork to allow a potential case of testing Roe v. Wade when it comes before the Supreme Court, that they have the precedents and the grounds to overturn it, because they've been throwing out previous court ruling. The practice is called stare decisis, of going off former court precedents. They're trying to ignore that as much as possible. So, as fun as this term was in getting some of the things we liberals wanted, such as that U.S. Census question, thrown out, we are probably going to see a concerted effort to repeal Roe v. Wade here in this next term. So be on the lookout for that. Elect a liberal president in 2020 so we can fill RBG and Clarence Thomas's spots when they're inevitably up. And let's feasibly get the court back to a liberal configuration, or at least one that makes any sort of semblance of sense. That's what I got for you with the Supreme Court, largely.
Yep, that was pretty comprehensive there. So yeah, there's some major rulings that have come out, and the ruling that I've taken most interest in, and if you guys are following, endorse another fellow podcast, but This Land has done an absolutely wonderful job hashing out why the Supreme Court case is extremely important, and it, not only has it shown massive holes in my education and knowledge about the history of Native Americans, and how
whitewashed history
of
America.
Well, I mean, pretty much, and also how awful the state of Oklahoma is, and just Andrew Jackson in general. But basically, Murphy versus Carpenter is a court case that began like a decade ago. It was with a murder. Yeah, exactly. No, it's a murder case that basically the public defender that was hired to defend Murphy and appeal his his death sentence was basically used the argument that Oklahoma had no right to prosecute Murphy, let alone charge him with a crime, because the land that the murder was committed on was a part of the original allotment of territory. So it was an Indian territory under U.S. law, because the only way for the United States to dissolve a Indian territory or reservation is through an act of Congress, which was never formally done. And this has taken years and years and years, and has finally made it up to the Supreme Court. Amazingly, action was deferred, which means they will re-argue the case next session, and they will make a ruling on it then, most likely, unless they decide to defer it again. But this case has major implications for the Indian populations, because they know it's the five, it will decide the fate of 5 tribes, which were quoted as the 5 civilized tribes, back when they were initially moved from their original lands in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, like Virginia, including like the Cherokee Nation, Muskogee Creek Nation and 3 others, and these are, they're the massive amounts of people and land that we're talking about, including like half of Tulsa and about a third of the entire state of Oklahoma, whether or not that land will be a reservation or not. And
so today, is the land today recognized as being a part of a reservation or being their land, or is that the dispute that
that's the major
not properly being recognized?
It's not. It has been an illegal. Not to call it
possession of the United States.
Pretty much, because it's very. I don't know, the podcast series does an absolutely wonderful job of diving into that, and Brett and I will cover this topic, Indian law and what it actually means for the people there in a later segment. And let's hope this isn't like a Brexit, which takes like 2 months to actually get to.
Well, it's funny. You say that because I can very easily see the court continuing to defer on this with its current composition. Well, I don't think they're going to touch this with a 10-foot pole.
This is the major political part that I wanted to get to, and the part that surprised me the most is the reason this is even a major competitive decision in the court is because Justice, I want to call him Merrick Garland, but for some reason that doesn't sound right.
I mean, Merrick Garland.
Merrick Garland. I know, but who is the
appeals court?
Who's the imposter that sits in his seat?
Gorsuch.
There we go.
Gorsuch.
That's what I was.
Wow, you
for.
really are living in the alternate reality where.
Oh, okay, no, that was more of me making a political point. But no, Justice Gorsuch. He ruled on the case when he was sitting on the 10th U.S. Appeals Court, and therefore had to recuse himself from making a final decision in the Supreme Court. And so because of that, it is a 4-4 decision. And if the court is hung with a 4-4, it then is the lower action is deferred, and that will then decide in favor of the Indian.
Of whatever the lower court decision was.
Yeah, the appeals court. Yeah, the appeals court ruled in favor of the tribes, and therefore, it'll go back.
Okay,
however, this is the reason it is still a major political contentious issue is because of Justice Ginsburg, who, despite her very liberal leanings in nearly all subjects, Indian law is not one of the things that she has consistently ruled in favor of, and only has about 50% voting record with contentious rulings regarding Indian law, and which is not, in a lot of these 5-3 or maybe like not 5-3, like 6-3 decisions or 5-4 decisions. These are ones that she has split from the rest of the Democrats and voted in favor with the conservatives. And this is another interesting part, is that the Supreme Court also ruled, there's precedent set that the Supreme Court has ruled in favor of Indian tribes before on the basis that the state has never, and this is not Oklahoma, this is Arizona, the state never dissolved the Indian territory. So despite the fact that there might not be a de facto Indian reservation, because they're legally remains one. That they have ruled that way before in completely unanimous decisions. But that, however, has been with much smaller land territories than we're talking. Because this Oklahoma is, not the smallest of states, but this is, it would become one of the largest reservations in the United States had they do actually rule in favor. So it'll be, that is a, obviously.
It's that fact right there that concerns me.
I mean, we will do a deep dive into this topic later, 'cause I have a lot to say.
We'll have to.
So
most assuredly, we will have to.
Yeah. So, anyways, all right. So, moving on to our next topic of discussion. The main goal of this podcast is obviously to talk about a lot of the news regarding state politics in the Midwest, and to ensure that we continue to fulfill our mission statement of the podcast. We will be talking.
36% after all.
That is very true. We will be talking about the individuals running for different public offices in the state of Missouri and Kansas. So, to start us off, some major news was broken today. Major news in the way that it's more of like when a secret comes out in the secret comes out that everyone actually knew, but no one was recognizing that we all knew it, and then we can all talk about how we now knew it. So, anyways,
well, this was the soft launch. This was when the new coffee joint down the street opens up, but just to friends and family. This is the soft launch. They just want the neighborhood to know.
Yeah,
they're
pretty
open.
much.
They see people inside and they go, oh, makes you think about it. So when the real launch happens, you're like, oh, I was primed and ready for this.
Think of this as this is how with presidential candidates, or we're taking a long time to introduce this. The presidential candidates will have an announcement of their exploratory committee, and then within a next week or two, they would then do their actual campaign kickoff. Think of this as the pre-exploratory committee announcement. Because they didn't even
potentially
do it. So basically, okay, to actually get to the point, today, the current Missouri State Senator from the first district, thank you very much, Scott Sifton, exactly, who is a graduate of Brett and I's alma mater.
What did Sifton do?
So basically, Sifton today tweeted, man, this is crazy. He tweeted that he fully endorses, I can read the tweet verbatim. I'm supporting Nicole Galloway for governor and encourage you to do the same. Her record as auditor makes her the right candidate to take back our state in 2020. So let's get it done! ! But with this tweet today, we can pretty much be assured that he is no longer going to be on the ticket for the Democratic primary.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be very astonishing if this was the case.
He might run for Attorney General again. He might be looking at another statewide.
I think that would be probably the best position. So to give you an idea, Nicole Galloway is currently the state auditor of Missouri. She was appointed back in 2015 after the tragic death of the elected state auditor, and she was appointed by then Governor Nixon to the position. And then the next 2 terms,
Jeremiah Nixon.
Yes, she won, and she was the only Democrat to be elected statewide in both 2016 when she ran initially, and then in the special, and then 2018 now. And she has, she very narrowly won her second election. Her first one was very impressive. But regardless, I mean, being able to win statewide as a Democrat in Missouri is extremely impressive. And she has done...
In 2016, when Claire McCaskill got walloped, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she outperformed, Claire and every other Democrat. Back in 2016, she did so with Hillary and Candor and that kind of thing. So
not surprising that her name would be thrown in the ring.
Oh, yeah.
Her name would be in the hat, which is in the ring.
Because there have been major rumblings of her running, and there's been plenty of talk and insight into this,
and I think the writing on the wall has been that it's going to be the Nicole Galloway show. I mean, even as Senator Sifton, who to my knowledge has really been the only Democratic state senator who's really taken a hard look at running for governor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as you mentioned, Missouri didn't have a statewide elected official in 2016, and it didn't have a statewide elected official in 2018. They lost a Senate seat, not long held in terms of the Senate, but since 2010, a Democratic Senate seat, they lost to the up-and-comer AG from Harvard, Princeton, Yale. He's just... The stereotypical Republican candidate from 2018 was able to knock down Claire McCaskill. Meanwhile, Nicole Galloway is wiping the floor with similar candidates in a, albeit lower position, but still a statewide position.
And one that, and this is the major thing, is the fact that she can win down ballot. I don't think that she had as great a vote. She did not have as many votes that Jason Candor got for Senate back in 2016. but she still managed to beat a Republican, which is, very impressive in this regard. So she's done extremely well and also performed very, very well in the role, basically, as because the state auditor is the basically like the corruption hound of
the one
state
doing all the
government.
audits on everybody.
Well, I mean, exactly.
Yeah.
And this is the major thing is the fact that she's been in this position and overseen it through the Watergate-like resignation of the disgraced governor of Missouri, Eric Greitens. And
Watergate-like.
I mean, it's very they basically, his own party forced him to resign.
It was Whitewater-esque more than it was Watergate-like, I would say.
I mean, it was like if
It was a bunch of charges founded on some sexual charge that then took on a life of its own. Not inappropriately, I would say.
Yeah,
I think a lot of the charges brought against him were legitimate, but the optics of it were very mixed.
Yes, but with an actual resignation instead of overwhelmingly resounding like public opinion polls going in your favor. We
started impeachment proceedings. They did that.
She has been basically in that position of power while Republicans have been continuously screwing over the state of Missouri, especially this year with the revenue scandals, and the just the massive amounts of overspending and illegal taxation that the Parsons administration has been conducting. So
and I mean the state auditor position too is just a very attractive position to run from, because it is something where you could say, look, I have made a career saving money, rooting out corruption.
Yeah.
Like, it's such an easy thing to point to all of your accomplishments because they're all related to cleaning government up, which is something that everyone supports.
Yeah, and also she's taken down, like Democrats and Republicans, and she is seen as a bit more of a moderate figure, but she's fantastic, and I very much, so very major things to look forward to, in the Missouri governor race in 2020.
I'm excited to see the race when it happens.
Yes, no, me too. I'm just also a major note that we have decided not to mention thus far is the fact that Nicole Galloway has not yet officially announced that she is running for governor.
Yes,
which makes this was a major key factor in the story. That makes this a very interesting topic, or a very interesting tweet from Scott Sifton or Senator Sifton. And so I don't know. It makes you question.
Was it ahead of the curve or was it a leak?
Yeah, like what is the
optimism?
Where is the?
We don't know.
Yeah, because it sounds he sounds very definitive in basically being like, I endorse her to run for governor, or for governor when she has not yet announced that she is running for governor.
Right.
So it will. I don't know. I don't think there's going to be much fallout from it. Scott Sifton does not have a massive Twitter following. This is not going to be a national news thing, and basically people that avidly. No, I mean, like, I think only the St. Louis Today is the only newspaper that's run a story on it thus far. So like, it's going to be this is a very pocketed piece of information, and this kind of thing. But like, talks of
and I don't believe that it wasn't intentional.
Yeah.
I mean, or at the very least that it wasn't unintentional.
No, of course.
I mean, if it were, it would have been deleted, and then we would have seen the story in the St. Louis, whatever the fuck. What is their newspaper? What's St. Louis' newspaper?
This was in the St. Louis Today that they announced, but the St. Louis Post St. Louis Post-Dispatch is the major newspaper there.
So in the St. Louis Today, we'd be reading, the St. Louis Dispatch even would be reading about how the Nicole Galloway's gubernatorial race was leaked, but instead it was probably just some strategy to. I mean, this was probably part of the exploratory committee to get to your original point.
I think so, and
see what the outcry would be about it.
Because I mean, Scott Sifton is he's far too he would know not to try and
he's
do
not a
any kind of
blithering
sabotage.
idiot.
Yeah, there's no this was only targeted to help her, and I think that I can see two motivations here, and I think that it's either very simply this is him in a way announcing that he's no longer running for governor, and simply just kind of getting ahead of the curve in allowing Democrats of Missouri to kind of unify around Nicole Galloway before her actual announcement, because that will be coming probably in the next month, next couple months or so. But I think also important, or it could be Scott Sifton dropping out of the contentious race to kind of give Nicole Galloway a green light to actually start raising money, start campaigning, and that kind of thing. Because thus far, he is.
That is also true.
Yeah, because as of I think like May, he had his re-election fund, for the governorship because he no longer the PAC set up in his name for him. Yeah, because his Senate term is up, and I think he has 1 year in the House or 2 years in the House that he could do again. But
something like that.
Basically, Missouri's term limits are stupid. But anyways, this would be this is him pushing her basically to start making those moves and that kind of thing because it no longer is a contentious issue because there's no,
or at the very least, like you said, this is a green light to donors to say, all right, like she has the blessing of someone who they've probably been looking at for a while now.
Yeah, and I think that this is because Nicole Galloway is an individual who can seriously galvanize support, donors, and all of that kind of stuff. She has the political resources and means to actually put up a very effective campaign. And her running from a statewide position is probably the best, hands down probably the best position to be in while running for governor. So,
I agree wholeheartedly.
Yes. So moving on to another Senate seat in Missouri, and this being a topic, an announcement that happened at least a month ago now, but during the break that Brett and I took. But Missouri's 15th Senate district is, for those of you familiar with St. Louis, encompasses part of Kirkwood, and very western St. Louis County and that kind of area. And quite suburban. And currently the seat is held by Senator Andrew Koenig, who is a extremely conservative state senator. He's a part of the conservative caucus of Missouri, and he very notably is the sponsor of the House and Senate, the Senate version of the abortion ban that passed through Missouri Senate on one of the last days of session. And this was
Way to go, Missouri.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And this was his creation basically. This law is the work of him, Senator Bob Onder, and Representative Schroer. And so anyways, but upon him announcing this, current Missouri House Representatives, like Representative Deb Lavender, who represents the Kirkwood area, has a very good Democrat. She's basically, I like to think of her as the Elizabeth Warren of Missouri. If Elizabeth Warren was in the House.
Kind comparison.
I mean, granted, like I think it's very well granted, and I will explain. Deb Lavender is probably one of the most prepared, one of the most fiscally minded, and attentive representatives in probably Missouri state history. She basically always comes with receipts. She knows what the fuck she's talking about, and you will never, ever, ever, ever see her, falter to go after anyone for basically doing wrong to the people of Missouri. So it is, I'm very happy that she has announced her candidacy for the 15th Senate District to take down Andrew Koenig. She is one of the most popular members of the Democratic caucus in the House, and I think that she, if able to win, would make one of the best additions to the Missouri State Senate, and get rid of probably one of the most problematic and awful individuals.
Certainly one of the more conservative.
Oh yeah, I mean one of the people that
the Missouri Senate,
that has influenced and made possible one of the least productive sessions in Missouri State's history, and passed one of the most and authored one of the most restrictive abortion bans in the entire country. So
yeah, her addition to the Senate would mean a lot, even though it would not change the super minority the Democrats are in. I think because of what you just mentioned, because this is replacing one of the most conservative voices with a staunchly pro-justice, progressive, liberal voice.
Yeah, I mean, and this was, I think, what it would it would send a message to the the conservative caucus and the super conservative members of the Senate who represent districts that can be competitive, like Senator Bob Onder or Senator Eigel, lesser so, or places in Springfield like Senator Huff. These are places that Democrats can win and have done so in the past, because they're not, the super rural areas of Missouri, like Missouri is 18th and that kind of thing. Like these places where the Democrats won't win for a long time now, but these are places in which Democrats have a chance. And I think that if these conservative members continue to put out such, vile, agendas and legislation, that it will hopefully, if Deb Lavender is able to win this seat, send a clear message to them that Missouri is no place for this. So I'm extremely hopeful.
Going off of that, I want to touch on the Kansas Senate race and the announcements that have been going on with that, because I think there are a lot of parallels to draw between what we were just talking about and an overarching point that we'll be making later. So this year, or rather in 2020, this year, feels like 2020 already. I'm not convinced the election isn't 6 weeks away. But in 2020, Senator Pat Roberts' seat is up. He's a Kansas senator. He's held that seat since 1997, which for those of you keeping score at home was the year that I was born. So for 22 years, that man has sat in the Kansas Senate, in one of the Kansas Senate seats. So far, a menagerie, throwback from 2 episodes ago, a menagerie of Republicans have announced at least an interest in running for the seat. Those names including the representative from the 1st Congressional District of Kansas, Roger Marshall, traditionally the 1st Kansas District, considering it's like 75% of the state. Whoever occupies that House seat is typically tapped to go on to the Senate seat, because they've already proven that they can win statewide, considering all you need to do to win statewide is win Western Kansas, which is the 1st District. Interesting to look at him. Also notables, we have the Kansas Senate President, Susan Wagle, so she's coming from Topeka, launching an exploratory committee on that. Everybody's favorite Secretary of State / immigration czar / crazy person, Chris Kobach, has been mentioned as having interest in running for it, and word on the street is that D.C. insiders are attempting to get Mike Pompeo out of the Trump administration and into Congress because, why the hell not? Let John Bolton be our Secretary of State. I don't really have a ton to say about those names so far. I think this is everything that we were coming to expect from Trump's re-election year in a Republican state such as Kansas. To have Trump Republicans falling in line behind him, I think they're attempting to kind of bump off whatever residual bump the president's going to get from stoking, the fears of immigration and things like that worked for him in 2016, but we saw it didn't work for him in 2018. I'll be interested to see any Republican coming out against Trump or the views that the 4 of these people are espousing thus far. That'll be interesting. But more notably, we have a couple of Democratic contenders that have gotten into the mix. Now, Adam, if you were to guess the last time a Democratic senator existed, what was the last time Kansas had a Democratic senator? What year would you guess?
I'm going to guess... Oh, God, that's a good question. I'm trying to think. I'm like... Is it like a Clinton? Is it like a 1991? But I want to say it's probably before then.
Just throw out even like a decade, even like the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, whatever. Just
I want to say
throw some out there.
I want to say the 70s was the last time.
Well, it was 1932, and let me tell you, if you think that Congress or that senator probably wasn't a Klansman, I'll tell you you're wrong. So to say that whoever we put up as the Democratic contender is fighting a little bit of an uphill battle is going to be an understatement. We don't have a culture of Democratic senators in this state, but boy howdy if this wasn't the time to turn that around. So far we have 3 different people who have announced. We have former U.S. Attorney for the District of Kansas, Barry Grisham, who is from the Overland Park, Eastern Kansas area, Kansas City metropolitan area, which is a Democratic stronghold, the only Democratic stronghold in the state. He's from there. Under President Obama, he was tapped to become the U.S. Attorney for Kansas. Most notably, his office was responsible for the prevention of 2 domestic terrorism bombings, but one at the Wichita airport and the other... God, where was the other one at? I forget, but they notably, again, stopped it. He launched his campaign officially this last week, and I think within 24 hours raised something like $160,000. So that's a promising start. Also, we have former Congresswoman Nancy Boyda, who served in the Kansas 4th District before it was reapportioned back in the 90s. She's one of the rare Democrats that have won in what has otherwise been a moderate to right-leaning, to Republican-leaning district. She served 1 term there before it was reapportioned, and she was beaten. But ever since then, she's been itching to get back into congressional politics from Kansas. So I'll be interested to see her campaign. And last but not least, we have the state senator, Barbara Boiler from Eastern Kansas, who made national headlines earlier this year when she switched her party from Republican to Democrat for reasons really unknown to the general public, other than it was better politics for where she was. So while it's far too early to really give you a deep dive of who these candidates are, I just want to express some of my frustrations, Adam, with the Democratic Party in the Midwest and what I thought we left behind and what it turns out people still think are our present to future. Adam, we chose the name the 36% because it represents the 36% of 18 to 24-year-olds that voted in 2016. We're hoping that we can change the title of this podcast in 2020 to be something more like 95%, because the 95% is a much better ring to it. Well, let me tell you how you're not going to get that number to 95%. When you have Democrats who are running on a platform of moderacy, who their entire message, their entire identity is, hey, I'm white, I'm from a red state, and I know how to talk to conservatives because I drink a beer with them on the weekends. People, this hasn't been working since the 90s because Bill Clinton buried it and murdered it, and it hasn't worked since, and it's not going to work going forward. So I'm exasperated, Adam. I'm exasperated when we have 3 promising Democratic candidates who have an interesting message, who have a great story, come out on day 1 of their launching their campaigns by saying, hey, I'm not like those liberal elites on the coast, which, hey, fair, we're not like them either, though we maybe aspire to be like them in our deepest, darkest fantasies. We're not like them. When they say, hey, I'm not like those Nancy Pelosi's and those Chuck Schumers of the world, I'm like Bob Dole. I want to fucking slam my head against a wall, Adam, I really do, because Jesus Christ, we need to be winning on the message of expanding Medicaid, of getting college more affordable, if not free, to these people, and to stop putting kids in fucking cages. And I'm sorry, but you can't wholeheartedly make that argument when you're saying that you're still willing to work with the party that is responsible and complicit in committing the worst crimes in America since, 20 years ago when we started paying attention. But my point being, we need bold progressive candidates to get the young people activated. And if you think you can win Kansas or rural Missouri or anywhere else in the Midwest without the young people, then Jesus Christ, my political science degree was for absolutely nothing.
Yep.
That's what I got.
Yep. Well,
that's Kansas politics right now.
The first hot take of the night, everyone. Brought to you by the failing Midwest Kansas Democratic Party.
God, well, it's like the National Democratic Party isn't interested in investing in places like Kansas because they only see one competitive district out of the 4, and they don't see a competitive Senate seat. And maybe that's my overarching point, is I feel like we're running into the same thing in Missouri in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Because though Nicole Galloway is a great candidate, we should be having more promising young Democratic voices being able to come up and at least primary her, but I can't think of a single person that is in the position to do so.
Yeah, we can fit on one hand the amount of Democrats that are young, progressive, people that, at least, are candidates that can, seriously galvanize the support and become competitive candidates for all peoples. And those, that's literally Jason Kander and Nicole Galloway. And
right, and one of those people isn't even in politics anymore.
Yeah, I mean, Jason Kander has surely taken a backseat, hopefully to take time, to, recover and continue to deal with the ongoing, struggle of suffering with PTSD. But I think that hopefully, that he takes that proper time and is able to return to the political sphere, because I think that he would be one of the best. He's, hands down, probably one of the best candidates for not only Missouri but for the country. But again,
you see the problem of there's two names right there,
and that's it.
There should be more, and there very easily could be more.
Yeah, and I think that not only is the consistent structure of Missouri politics not of being a very unattractive position to hold and get into. I think that might put Senator Brian Williams among that group, but him being a one session freshman senator, I think that we will see how his candidacy plays out, or his future political career plays out. But I think that those three names are about it, and I think that the fact that Missouri has very short term limits and has a very disinterest in politics. Missouri in general, just I think that the lack of excitement about Missouri politics are basically killing our chances of creating these candidates, like Jason Kander and like Brian Williams and like Nicole Galloway. I think that the state just is not set up to favor that ability, because when we mention people like Senator Roy Moore or Mike Parsons. Mike Parson. No one has
Roy Moore or Mike Parsons.
There's
I'm sure he'd appreciate the flattering comparison.
There's not Roy Moore. Roy Blunt, excuse me. See, I can't even get his name right, which tells you.
Geez, I don't like Mike that much either, but that's kind of a
no.
That's kind of a mean comparison.
Excuse me. No, Roy Blunt or Mike Parsons. These people that their names mean practically nothing to most people, even in the state of Missouri. But that's because I don't think that the last rising star from the Republican Party in Missouri was Eric Greitens, and we saw how that ended. So
yeah, but and this will tie into my next point. But with Mike Parsons, with Governor Parsons, and with Senator Blunt, there's a very important difference in how they got to where they are versus what we're looking at the Democratic candidates to do. Now, Roy Blunt had the family dynasty to get him to that point, but Mike Parson is the small little sleepy time sheriff from Bolivar, Missouri, and he's made his way to the governorship. Now, that wasn't through any fault of his own, but we look at, if you
I don't know about
look
that.
At who's funding well,
that's questionable.
His ascension was of no. Well, yeah, you're right. Actually,
was
there are a lot of strings to be courted in that
we cannot
conspiracy.
Get confirm or deny whether or not he actually had a part to play in the takedown of Eric Greitens.
Right, but to my point, if you look at how they made their ways from where they started to where they were, you see an infrastructure to assist in the process. And this isn't to necessarily blanketly point fingers, but the Republican National Committee and the Missouri Republican Party have made sure that there have been platforms for these people to run on and make sure that they have backing and funding along every step of the way. And when you have the DCCC coming out and saying that we're only going to back certain candidates, we're only going to be investing in places that it's smart for us to invest, we're not going to be laying the groundwork for a long-term bench to be constructed, built, and then hopefully mobilized, we see why the Republican Party is doing so much better in these states, and it's difficult for us to play catch up because we don't have the resources in place like they do. We have the resources to maybe support a candidate here and there, but we don't have such a deep bench like they do. And this gets to probably my overarching thoughts and feelings for what we saw coming out of the debates from the other night, is that my biggest concern for 2020 was that I couldn't think of, and you can go back in the podcast and probably find me saying this at some point, was that I couldn't think of more than a handful of names, mostly people that ran in 2018, of Democrats who would have made great 2020 candidates. And as I said the other night, I'm looking at this field of 20 candidates, 25, 5 that didn't make the debate stage, but 20 on the debate stage, who I can say confidently I would be happy with just about any one of them as a president. I would be happier with any of them over Donald Trump. But the diversity of thought, the diversity of ethnicity, the diversity of backgrounds, of socioeconomic status that we're seeing out of all these candidates is incredibly promising for the Democratic Party. However, in my opinion, it's a very small snapshot from specific areas where it exists. Mm-hmm. It does not demonstrate a robustness and a health across the entire nation. And we're seeing that in polling too, where Joe Biden's the most popular one. Yeah. He should be the least appealing Democrat out of all of them.
Actually, this will tie in well today. The senator from Alaska, Lisa Murkowski, did I'll tie this in. Did an interview with NPR today that I caught glimpses of, and they were talking about whether or not, she was, talking about the electoral college and how there was a push to reform and even abolish the electoral college in some regards. And there was a line that really stuck out to me when she talked about how she basically said that these are the rules of the game, and and if the Democratic Party basically continues to fail because they don't create a winning strategy to play to the map. They don't, which was, I thought, very, it ties into this point, because while we see that the Democratic Party is the big tent party, and that we are, we encompass far more demographics, people of different socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, all of these things that we can claim higher numbers on, and different groups and that kind of thing. We sometimes, there is this lack of attention that is often granted to a lot of these Midwest states, and Western states that do not represent those diverse and those diverse different represent different groups that a lot of these states don't have. So I think that I'm gonna push back on you, and it's surprising to me that you're agreeing with those remarks, considering I know how much you want to get rid of the filibuster. No, I mean, this is, and I'll explain my parallel and reason. Okay. Because Lisa Murkowski is someone who, it doesn't surprise me that she's making these remarks of the Democrats are simply failing to play by the rules. If the electoral college is the rule, they need to just play the game better. Mm-hmm. And I would generally agree with that sentiment, because I think it speaks to my point, is that we suck at playing the game. However, it would behoove us to play the game more effectively if the Republicans were also playing the game, but they're not. Mm-hmm. As we saw in one of the one of the big decisions of the term, the court chose to step back from political gerrymandering because there's no good solution for it. The reason it's a problem, there's no good solution for it, is that the Republicans have been spending the last 40 years packing the lower courts to help them in the political gerrymandering process, which leads into the electoral process, which contributes to the electoral college unrepresenting 3 million people in the popular vote. I mean, it's no different from how they're abusing the rules of the Senate to completely block up any hope of democratic process actually surviving. I would love to formulate a better game plan if I simply knew that the rules of the game weren't so so clearly stacked against us. Yeah, I'm completely agreeing with you. I think that all that's entirely true, and my main purpose for pointing this out is the fact that I think that because things are so stacked against us, either politically or simply based on population diversity and density. We know we're not going to invest the same resources in electing a senator from Wyoming as we are going to a senator from New Jersey. Like, we know that, or Florida or Ohio, places that we have, these battleground states, and we're not going to divert those same resources to these other states that we know we don't have much of a chance of winning. And I think
you can say Kansas, you won't hurt my feelings.
I mean, Kansas, that's the thing though, is that I think that Kansas and Missouri, and to a lesser, to the same degree, Iowa have, or I guess, okay, rephrase. Kansas and Iowa have shown that without that kind of support and that kind of thing, they are still able to, this trend of republicanism is coming to, is being weakened in recent years. And that's, with the election of Laura Kelly to the governor of Kansas, or to Democrats now holding 3 of the 4 U.S. representative seats of Iowa. It's 3 of the 4, 2 of the 3. Regardless, 2 of the 4. They flipped.
Yeah, but Steve King held on to his seat.
Yeah,
so
which is ridiculous.
no, Democrats are gaining headway.
I'm not saying
that
Nazis. I'm not saying we have not fully won out that war, but I'm saying that we need to, that there is, that there is the ability for Democrats to rise naturally within these Democratic candidates winning. There's I think that we just need to continue doing it, and hopefully by that, and keep proving to the nation that we are able to elect Democrats in places like this. Because without that,
I don't know.
Without that, I think that we would have a much better job if the DNC was invested in retaking Claire McCaskill's seat, and and getting Jody Ernst out of office in Iowa. And these, I think that there are. I think that the more we win, hopefully the more attention is paid to it. But
I think my argument would be, let's not have the win be the proof in the pudding.
Right?
Let's be investing in these areas to invest in these areas so we can have a chance of winning. Because whether or not we invest or not is not going to stop the Republicans from investing.
No.
I think it's my overarching point is they've been blindly investing in these places where they had no hope of winning. And at the very least, they get to move the needle a little bit. Meanwhile, we're not competing in Kansas. When I say that we didn't have a national party representative in the 4th district, which is historically competitive, when I say we didn't have one for most of the 2000s, I mean until 2016, we did not have one.
Which is insane.
So it's this lack of faith in these places that just boggles my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, this leads into my overarching point of my takeaways from the debates, in that I largely see these 2 warring parties of the Democratic Party still alive, but one is seemingly pulling ahead, and that is we have the difference in the camps between the progressives, just about everybody, and the old era moderates, which are the Hickenloopers, the Delaney's, and the Bidens of the Democratic Party, who are still convinced that they can work within the system and somehow come out victorious. When I think we need a much bolder progressive strategy that looks at rewriting, or at least correcting, the injustices done to the system and the way it's gamed to make it more equal and more fair. We won't get there if we continue to attempt to take the high road on a lot of these issues. Mm-hmm. And as cynical as that is, it's something I'm convinced of.
The mayor of South Bend, Indiana, today tweeted a very welcoming and heartfelt message to the one and only Lil Nas X, who recently
what?
Yeah, no, he tweeted today. He was like, "Welcome to the the LGBTQ community."
Oh, Lil Nas. I thought you said Wilmot, and I was like, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
Hello?
Hello? God?
Brett?
Bladham.
Brett?
Listen, if you're talking, I can hear. Oh, no, there you go. Well, I hope you keep recording. I hope you didn't stop recording. That would be really unfortunate if you stopped your recording.
That was
I
weird.
hope. Did you stop? Did you keep your recording going?
Yeah, of course.
Perfect. All right.
You're not about to cut that off. No. Okay. Yeah, before you.
Fucking Lil Nas. Hurry up. I want to be done.
All right. So basically, anyways, Lil Nas X came out and very cryptically, in a way, but also not cryptically, as being a part of the LGBT community, which has swept Twitter and the internet in a major fashion, and I think justifiably, in the words of my great co-host, did we really think that a straight person could?
Is anybody surprised that it was a queer black man that took over the country charts with a hip hop song? Is anybody really surprised by that?
And my response was, did we really believe that that a straight person could be so funny on Twitter?
Exactly.
So that is our.
It all makes sense in the branding.
So
Come on.
basically, good job, Pete Buttigieg, to do this, because Lord knows you need help from the African American community, in regards to your polling, because it's awful. So, on that last note, I think we.
Sounds like you're wanting to talk about a hot take there. You might have.
I think that might be the course of action by which we dive into next. So, having extensively covered topics for the last hour and a half, we will be
everything that we could think of.
pretty much be moving into our last section of the night, hot takes. So, Brett, we have discussed many things. Give me your hot takes.
Yeah. So my hot take for this, which is probably to no one's surprise, considering it's been what I've been harping on for the last hour and a half, is that though I think the Democratic Party, liberals in general, we very few, we can pat ourselves in the back at the end of the day and say that we are the party that does things morally and correctly. I think if we continue to play by the rules of the game as they currently stand, we're going to lose another seat on the Supreme Court. We stand to lose the presidency. We stand to lose whatever hope we have of taking back the Senate. And what that means is that life as we know it will end. So my hot take is that Democrats need to get their asses off the sideline. We need to get out of this imaginary moderate middle that we think still exists, that we know just based on pure numbers. And that's it again, baby. Those numbers and statistics, those college-educated liberal elites like so much. But if you just look at the fucking polling numbers, there are no more moderates left. If they're left, they're not a significant voting bloc. We need to be talking to the people about the things that they care about, and that's making sure that they can have health care when they get injured, that they can have preventative health care, and that the world isn't going to end in 12 fucking years like the UN says it will. And that includes things like not going to war with Iran, not butting up to North Korea, not promoting nuclear proliferation, and believing in climate science. And if you don't do those basic things, those very basic things, I think those are the people the DCCC and the DNC should be cutting off from running in elections. Though I believe that voices in primaries are important, I think now is not the time to entertain this fantasy that we can somehow play by the far right's established rules and be victorious in any capacity. I think we need to get our hands dirty. We need to throw some elbows. We need to win a fucking election as if our lives depend on it. That's my hot take. States.
Pretty much. Okay, so my hot take from this week, going back to the Supreme Court decision on Murphy v. Carpenter, I think that my major hot take is two things. One is that the death penalty is entirely, and it's awful and it's wrong, and that despite the fact that I believe his name is John Murphy, is a murderer, that he should not be put to death for it. And that I think my second hot take is the fact that I largely, wholeheartedly believe that the state of Oklahoma has absolutely no judicial precedence to convict him of such a crime and try him, and let alone sentence him to death. It is based on Congress's own rules, the Constitution, judicial precedent, and the fucking Supreme Court, that they have absolutely no right to govern citizens of these, native and indigenous tribes and nations, because they set their own groundwork and their own rules, and for the past 200 years have wholeheartedly done everything in their power to undermine, to destroy, and to impoverish and marginalize such a large group of people that have such rich history, claim, and more importantly than that, a right to their ability to govern themselves, to be sovereign, and to abide by the same rules that they agreed and negotiated with the United States government over. And real quick, fuck Andrew Jackson for his role in not only the militarized annihilation of hundreds, tens of thousands of Native Americans, but also his total disrespect for the judicial proceedings of John Marshall in his ability to defend and to rule in favor of these these Native Americans and their ability to to have the right to be sovereign. And also he's also just a terrible human being, and it should say enough that he is Trump's favorite president. So anyways, on that note,
Stare decisis. It's only for suckers.
Basically.
Fuck standing precedent.
No, I mean, but more importantly, the Supreme Court should fucking do its job, and it should not defer action like it has.
Say that because they think their job is very different from what you and I want it to be.
But their job in regards to abiding by precedent and setting the proper legal groundwork to defend their own fucking positions. So they should obviously rule in favor of Murphy and not only save this man's life, but they should also take one small fucking inch in regards to repairing the proper, reparation, not only reparations, but, to the proper, I don't know, some kind of dignity back to the thousands of indigenous peoples that still live in the United States, because they are one of the most marginalized and least politically, legally, and, in our case, the socially protected peoples that still live in the United States, a place that they have, not only lived in, raised families in, and called home for way longer than we have fucking been here.
Yeah, the place they're native to.
Which is why why we should. It is about goddamn time that we recognize some of the injustices we have done and start taking steps in correcting such awful wrongs. And that.
But we'll see.
Yep. Man. Anyways, I wasn't sure how worked up I was gonna get, and there was a lot of teeth clenching throughout that whole thing. Ugh.
Well, that's all I got for this week.
The 36% was founded, written, and directed by Adam Childers Arnold and Brett Combs.
Music in this episode was provided by Purple Planet. You can go and check them out at purple-planet.com.
The presenting sponsor of the 36% is, as always, Avian Apparel.
The music editing for this podcast was done by Brett Combs.
Our ukulele music, as always, is Adam California.
Research and outlining was hypothetically done in the mind of Benjamin.
And likewise, the scheduling, which none of it was done by Yorkie March to the Sea Sherman.
Our cover art was done by the wonderful Christian Ferguson.
Yes, who might have another job to do if, as of next election, we get to change our number, hopefully. Yeah. So, anyways, special thanks this week to all of the people, all of the candidates in Missouri, in Kansas, and all over the Midwest that are stepping up and at least, throwing their hat in the ring and running in races that are, that places that we have traditionally not won as Democrats, and not, either not even put candidates up for, but taking that leap of faith, because running for office is very difficult, and all of you deserve to win. And for those of you that do...
Specifically Marion Williams.
Okay, I was... Okay. That's not what I was going for, but anyways. Special thanks to everyone, every Democrat out there running for office, at not the presidential level. Gotta make that real clear. And as always, special thanks to all of our listeners, all of you that have full-fledgedly come back as listeners to the 36% for this season 3. Quick shout out to our listener in France, who is the latest country of the growing list of our international listeners. So bonjour, and I don't know how to say welcome to the podcast in French. So the pod is probably the podcast. There we go. I was like, I'm pretty sure it's just the podcast, but we'll see. Anyway, write us, all of you, and let us know what you think as always. So I guess without further ado, I'm Adam.
And I'm Brett.
And this has been the 36%.